It's a watershed moment in terms of what they're seeing with these deals, right? When we saw in Saudi, you'll see it, UAE. It just shows, I mean, they're getting to the front of the line versus the Chinese that are obviously back of the line relative to a lot of the blockades with the NVIDIA H20s. And I think this is key. The AI revolution coming to the Middle East.
Indeed. And Sam Altman is also traveling alongside the president. There is a chance that OpenAI could also announce new data center capacity in the UAE. It would make sense. We know Mubadala as MGX is a stakeholder in OpenAI. Is that something that you're also tracking, Dan? What else can we expect to see from the president's arrival here in the UAE and potential announcements on tech moving forward?
Yeah, Dan, I think it's really going to be about supercomputer data center build-outs. I mean, because look, everyone's focused on outside U.S., like where the growth is. Of course, it's China. Europe's really nowhere. And then look, Middle East, I mean, that's sort of the golden goose that everyone's going after, from Jensen to Palantir to obviously Musk and everyone else. You're going to see more and more of these announcements over the next 24, 48 hours that aligns with what we saw in Riyadh.
Dan, you called this a watershed moment. Is Saudi Arabia now ahead of China in the global AI race, or is that an overstatement?
Look, I think it's an overstatement in terms like they're not like China. It's U.S. and China, but here's the thing: without the NVIDIA chips, you're nowhere in AI revolution. There's only one chip fueling the AI revolution. That's NVIDIA, and I think that's a big issue with China in terms of that blockade on the H20s. Relative to Saudi Arabia and obviously UAE and others, getting the next-gen NVIDIA chips. That continues to be the key.
Just on this NVIDIA Humane deal, what exactly makes it different from some of the other global AI plays that we've seen? Obviously, a very significant announcement coming out of the kingdom this week. Why is it so important, and how soon before we see a material impact there?
Look, I think it wasn't on the radar relative to numbers this big. And I think the fact that they're going so aggressive in terms of the supercomputer build-outs, obviously opening, and you see in terms of U.S. tech toward Riyadh, I think that's what's so significant. Because it's not just about the 18,000 chips. It's about what's behind it. You know, and ultimately, look, we believe this could end up being $1 trillion in incremental spend across Middle East for AI, and that was not factored into these stocks.
$1 trillion for incremental spend, Dan, you said.
Yeah, look, and that speaks to our view why it's been such a game changer this weekend. It's a shot across the bow at China relative to the NVIDIA chips.
Interesting to also see AMD locking in this $10 billion partnership with Humane. What do you make of that deal, Dan? And does that finally position AMD as a credible challenger to NVIDIA when it comes to AI compute and deal flow in this part of the world and beyond?
Look, it continues to be NVIDIA's world, everyone else paying rent. Okay, but AMD, obviously others are trying to narrow the gap. For Lisa Su, I mean, that was a significant deal. They're going to continue to sort of basically say, don't forget about us. I mean, that's what really that moment was about. And they're going to be big beneficiaries as well. It's not just a zero-sum game. It's not just about NVIDIA. AMD is going to be a big beneficiary, and that's why, you know, they were with Trump in terms on the trip.
You mentioned this before, but I wanted to understand a bit more about how these partnerships with the Gulf nations are ultimately going to impact global AI development moving forward. Obviously, the US is a leader, China coming in as a close second, and then, of course, significant capital and energy and investment happening in the Middle East. You mentioned this before, but where does all of this leave Europe, which has, over the last few years, essentially regulated itself out of any possibility to have a leg up in this sector?
I mean, look, that's the shame. And somebody like myself, you know, that spends so much time in Europe, there is innovation that wants to be there. You saw, you know, in France when they had the AI conference. But right now, when you look who are the losers from these deals, it's China, and I think Europe. Europe's a loser from the deal because it just shows, you know, everyone is in this AI party, and Europe's outside the party looking in, saying, let us in. But the regulatory won't let it, and that's why where are these chips going? They're not going to, you know, they're not going to Europe. I mean, they're years and years behind, especially when you look where the Middle East is.
So let's talk about the regulation side as well, because the US has, of course, just started taking steps to scrap this AI diffusion rule. It's really significant, Dan. I know you've been speaking about it quite a lot, but how much of that decision to scrap AI diffusion is going to be a green light for some of these US chip exports? Because some have also said that this could potentially backfire down the line. Clearly, still a lot of concerns about this technology ending up in the wrong hands.
Look, it's a green light. I mean, like, obviously, national security, others, they're going to have to continue to focus, but I think it just shows this new era of AI that's happened around the globe. It's really been U.S. focused, and now it's spreading, and it's U.S. tech that's leading it, and that's why we continue to view this. It's a fourth industrial revolution. Regulatory now is starting to, clearly come down, and that's a huge positive.
Dan, I know you're a bull on the street, but where does this leave your top picks in the space? You mentioned before that, I love this line, it's NVIDIA's world, everyone else is paying rent. Is NVIDIA still your top pick in the space right now?
Yeah, it's NVIDIA, Tesla, Palantir, Microsoft, as well as Apple. That to me is where we see things today.
Anything you want to be avoiding in this environment, Dan?
I think you focus on AI because this is a tech bull market that's here, and now it's just starting to expand. And that's why we continue to focus on growth, not sort of value. And, if you focus on valuation, you'll miss every transformational tech stock the last 20 years.
What about when it comes to the broader macro, though? I know you watch this really closely, but we've seen some pretty clear concerns about perhaps rates staying higher for longer. Of course, recession headwinds also ramping up here. Your thoughts on whether or not the macro might actually dent or derail some of the bull calls you have on the street for these mega growth names?
Look, macro's there, and obviously it's a little choppy, but especially after the weekend in terms of the U.S.-China deals, de-escalation, I don't see a recession, and that's positive for AI, and it's positive for tech growth.
Do you think the trade deal is going to be perhaps a catalyst for a broader market move higher? A temporary trade truce, I should say, not necessarily a deal, but your thoughts on that as well?
Look, we believe new tech highs could be on the horizon for the rest of the year. In terms of hitting that market highs 2025, we'll see more and more deals. But this is bullish for tech and bullish in terms of the AI revolution. Still early days.
Dan, just before I let you go, and back to the politics of all of this, it was suggested to me this week that President Trump might actually deserve some credit here for catalyzing this surge in U.S. Mideast partnerships on the investment side, on the technology side, on the AI side. What's your take on that? Were the chips ultimately going to fall in this direction anyway, or has the president unlocked what could be a new era of growth in this sector?
Look, you got to give credit. I mean, Trump has unlocked it. That's why all the tech CEOs are with him. And I think that was clear in Riyadh. It's clear this whole week. And that's why it's been a watershed moment. And you got to give credit where credit's due. And I think we're really seeing the beginning of a new era.